It's betting, Jim, but not as we know it.
How dare you? Are you just talking to yourself?
Two, one, four.
It is 18 minutes past 2 p.m. on Friday, the 8th of March 2024. And you are listening to the BashCash. Coming up in this afternoon's BashCast, Tom realises that now he has quit drinking. He in fact hates a lot of the human race. Cheltenham Festival is on Monday, so we look at tipsters, who you can trust, who you cannot trust. A shift in liquidity at the exchanges as Matchbook, Betdaq and Smarkets catch ground on Betfair. In the main event this week, we talk to Abbie MacGregor and Andrew Woodman from the Gamblers Consumer Forum about last week's debate on affordability checks in gambling at Parliament. All of that and more coming up in the BashCast this afternoon. The Cheltenham Festival coming up in 3-4 days' time. So going to talk a little bit about that today on the podcast. Also got Abbie and Andrew. Decided to put them at the end of the podcast, not because I'm more important, which I'm not, but because actually I didn't want to have them and then ramble on about my stupid life. It was probably more important to get the stupid stuff over and then go over to Abbie. So a bit of me, a bit of exchange stuff, bit of Cheltenham stuff. I've been away just for a little bit of time. I have been snowboarding. This was my first snowboarding trip where I haven't been drinking. So no hangover snowboarding trip. I'm not telling anyone what to do. I'm no preach. In fact, I'm going to be drinking again soon because I love it. But I have a great relationship with alcohol. The two of us get on fantastically. I love nothing more than sitting down in the afternoon with a bottle of wine with my friends. But look, I just decided that the time was right for me last year to have a bit of time off. So something like 100 days. It might not be exactly 100, but that's what I'm aiming for. I've got to say, after a couple of months, I do notice quite a few differences, quite a lot of positive differences. Somebody listened to me talk about this before. They got in touch with a drink called Momo Kombucha. Never had kombucha before. Love it. It is for me. Works really well. And that's a good brand, that Momo Kombucha. Even though all the money I'm saving from alcohol is basically going on that. But it's more like the sleep and the overall mood is elevated. Energy is elevated. I can now exercise in the evening, which is dangerous news because I'm kind of over-exercised now. Like, before, I'd have a drink early evening and then that would be it for the day. Well, now if I'm not having any alcohol, I'm jumping on the Peloton before bed. My legs are tired. I'm really tired. I'm overtrained. But that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing, right? And just the little things like memory recall and language just seem to be a little bit sharper now. I won't lie, I do miss just going and sharing an alcoholic drink with friends, and also it's kind of the only poison that you can put into your body, where if you don't poison yourself, certain friends and random strangers seem to be offended by you. Certainly, I was in a bar. We went down to this bar, and the barman, big gay French barman man, and he was buying, I think it was his pub, and he was buying everybody in there some shot of toffee vodka, and I said, no, thank you. I'm not drinking alcohol. I might as well have set fire to the Champs-Elysees. I mean, he was screaming, what is wrong with you? I was the first person ever not to have been drinking, to have walked into this bar. So they did me like a shot of Diet Pepsi or Coke. Didn't trust it. So I did one of those stupid things that you do where I pretended to down it and then hid it around the corner. And then when I went to the loo, I went and flushed it away. It's like, how pathetic am I? But And the bar was a funny bar. It was carnage. It was a proper drinking bar. As we went down there was like this 55-year-old lady leaning over a bin. And she says to the 55-year-old man that's next to her, look, I'm not going to promise you a shag, but will you look after me? And the guy turns into like a 14-year-old teenager. He's like, yeah, I'll look after you. And I've walked past him. And I'm walking down the steps to the bar. And he screams, emergency, emergency. As she has said, go get your coat. Literally said, go get your coat. And he comes running past me going, you're British, you'll understand, won't you? And I'm like, you're 55 years old. Behave like it. But everybody was wasted. And I wasn't. And so I had slight smugness in the morning when I was able to wake up and not have a hangover. And I was on my own at the end of the day on the mountain because I wasn't drinking during the day. And so I had more energy. And so come 4 o'clock, everyone wanted to hit the bar. And I just went back up to the top by myself. Call that sad if you want. I actually had a great time enjoying it. I was listening to a band called Sleep Token, my first ever metal band that I like. I normally had this thing that the two music genres I didn't like were country and western and metal. Country and western because it's country and western, and metal because like house music comes from a place of love, metal comes from a place of anger. That was always my thought with that the screaming and all of that. I think I've slightly changed my tune. Don't know why, maybe, but I love this Sleep Token, who are completely anonymous. No one knows who they are. They do really, but that's meant to be the idea. They've had 3 albums. Go and listen to them. They're amazing. So I enjoyed the snowboarding. I'm actually heading back out in a couple of weeks. I wasn't going to, but I came back enjoying it so much. I'm going to go back in March before the season ends, take the kids. Also took the kids down to London, and get this for an allegory of life. You know how I hate mobile phones and think that they are the demise of society and people can't behave themselves? In all honesty, you should have to pass a test to be a responsible mobile phone user, and if you don't pass it, you shouldn't be allowed one. Well, we went to platform 9 3/4, which, given that my kids aren't in the house, is garbage. It's hot garbage. Don't do it. We did it on a Saturday lunchtime, which was the fatal mistake. Full of tourists, but no children, like grown-up Japanese tourists. And we queued for like an hour before we realised that there was still an hour and a half left of the queue and we were going to miss the whole day. And we had things to do like the Science Museum and some arty-farty workshops to go to and stuff like that. So made the decision not to do platform 9 3/4 at King's Cross. Then we'll do it later in the day when the queues died down. Went back at like after dinner. It's still a massive queue. Like over an hour. So we're just not going to queue for this, kids. I'm sorry, but there is a Harry Potter shop, right? So we'll go to the Harry Potter shop. Oh my God, there's a queue for the Harry Potter shop. Unfortunately, that one was only about 10-15 minutes. So we're in the queue for that with Hermann Goering in his SS uniform, making sure that everybody was stood by the wall. Stand by the wall. Don't stand any further into King's Cross. And along the concourse next to where we were stood, someone had been sick. I don't know if it was a poorly person or a child, but whoever it was had carried forward momentum whilst being sick. So the sick was along a line along the queue. It smelt and was frankly disgusting and not worth the time and effort. But I mean, we had to take the kids to see something Harry Potterish after promising all of this. And so I'm kind of nauseated staring at the sick. And there was a stream of London commuter traffic coming through the concourse. And what does everybody do when they're walking through a railway station or a bus station or down the road these days? What does everybody do? Do they admire the construction of the fellow human beings that are around them with a wink and a smile? Are they pleased to be alive? No, every single person has got their face stuck into their mobile phone because they can't live without it for about 15 seconds, and they've obviously been on the underground with no 3G, and heaven forbid that they don't know what's happening in the world of Twitter or Facebook or tickety-tockety. And they walked past the queue, and each and every single one of them walked into the sick until they realised that they were walking into the sick, and then they would kind of do this lifting their feet up, but it was too late, and realization that they're walking through sick and staring at their phone, and they're thinking, this is your fault, mobile phone. It wasn't the mobile phone's fault. It was your fault, pal, for the fact that you couldn't look where you were going. And it could have been funny, but I didn't find it funny. I found it depressing and like a sad indictment on the state of human beings and their addictions to their mobile phones these days. And I stared and I looked at them and I wondered, if there was a ticket to an alien planet, I would be on it tomorrow given the chance, and that was me, and what I've been doing, and how much I've hated the human race recently. Gambling and chat. And gambling and chat. Gambling and chat. Gambling and chat. Gambling and chat. With Cheltenham Festival 2024 coming round next week, I'm going to start an annual warning of be careful out there. The streets are dangerous at this time of year. There's a lot of charlatans, naysayers, fly-by-night con men out there, and you have to separate the wheat from the chaff. Joseph Buckdow put it very well. Falling victim to the law of small numbers also explains why genuinely sharp tipsters find it so hard to hang on to customers. They run after a relatively short losing run. I have to pause this bashcast in 8 minutes' time because I have a clinic call. The note from my clinic call reads that this particular person has cancelled bookie bashing because not a single bet has won. Now, if they've had 1,000 bets at 1 to 10 and not a single bet has won, something's going on. If they've had 10 bets at 1,000 to 1, nothing's going on. And neither of those facts that I just stated consider equity or EV. They're just considering variance. If no bets are winning at 1 to 10, it doesn't take long for a large enough sample size to suggest the model is wrong. If few bets are winning at 1,000 to 1, it doesn't really take a genius to suggest that we just need to wait a little bit longer, no matter what the equity EV is, unless it's a billion %. But it's the interesting thing about Cheltenham, because how many races are there at Cheltenham Festival? It's a rhetorical question because I have the answer right here. There are, as he delays and counts them up, 35 races at Cheltenham Festival. At least there were in 2023. And in 2022, there were 28. Have I missed a day? Oh, it doesn't really matter. Look, when you're dealing with those kind of sample sizes, it comes down very much to short-term variance. You cannot look at a single tipster or service and look at 1 year's worth of data, or even 2 years worth of data, or even 3 years worth of data, and deduct whether they are long-term profitable or not. It takes way more than that. So any tipster coming up and sort of shouting from the rooftops how great he is, just take him with a pinch of salt. And there are so many. There's more than ever. Maybe I'm just noticing more than ever. I don't know. One good way of looking at this would be to have a look at Darren Brown's YouTube video or television program on the system. So magician and psychic alien man Darren Brown came up with a horse racing system. Of course he did. Who hasn't come up with a horse racing system? And in this horse racing system, he guaranteed winners. And he pushed out his predictions before the start of each race. And I think there were 5 races. And in each race, there were 6 horses. And he pushed out his horse in the first race and it won. And then his horse in the second race and it won. And the lady looking at this is like, oh my day. So she started filming herself and she put money on the horse in the third race. It was like 18 to 1. She put 20 quid down and it won. And then horse money in the fourth race and it won. So then, convinced this is a system that cannot lose, as many people are when they see these short-term things, she then puts down a crazy amount of money on the last horse because she's convinced that whoever this is, and I don't think she knew it was Darren Brown, couldn't lose, had a system, had a way of winning that was better than anybody else, than any trader or market maker. So in the show The System, Darren Brown compares such a feat to flipping a coin 10 times.
Part of what makes the system seem so impossible is that it defies our understanding of probability and influence over future events. And I'm going to show you something now which is impossible in exactly the same way. And that is to toss a coin fairly 10 times in a row and have it come up heads every time. Now, we film this under controlled conditions with multiple cameras that won't cut away, and it's a genuine coin with heads on one side and tails on the other. But I want you to watch this and try and work out how it can be possible, because the key to understanding this is the key to understanding the system. 10 heads in a row. Watch. One. That's heads. Two. That's heads. Heads. That is four. Six. Seven. 9 heads. Last one. 10 heads in a row. Thank you very much indeed.
So I did some editing there just to speed up the 10 heads because it lasted for a little bit long, but you get the idea. The guy was in a laboratory. He flipped 10 heads in a row. 2 to the power 10 is 1,024. So that's like 0.1% probability chance. The chances of his horses winning, let's just remove the odds of each horse from the race. There were 5 races, 6 horses in each race, so 5 to the power 6, 7,775 to 1 with the odds of that. How can he do it? How can he have a system? Well, there's a lot of people out there that believes that he knows something that other people do not know, that he can do things that other people do not know, and they do not need to know the explanation. Actually, the explanation completely defies any sense that he is winning or somehow beating the mathematics. People think the mathematics can be beaten. They can't. Quite simply, that trick with the penny in the laboratory was nothing more than the law of large numbers. There's a 2 to the power of 10, 1,023 chance to 1 chance that 10 heads come up in a row. So what did he do? He stood there until it happened. It took 9 hours. I'd have loved to have been sat in that meeting working out what the probability that it takes 3 days is, because it's definitely a reasonable probability. But yeah, I mean, however long it takes you to flip 10 heads, that took him that long. And within 9 hours, he was able to flip 10 heads in a row. Stood there over and over again. I wonder how many times he got to 9. I wonder how many times he got to 8. But that's exactly the same thing as the horse racing system, where, in fact, he didn't just push out these bets to one person. He pushed them out to 7,776 people. And 5 out of 6 of them, 83%, got the loser in the first race, but 1/6 of them carried forward. And then 1/6 of those people carried forward to the third, and 1/6 of those carried forward to the fourth race. And then there's 6 people left, each on an individual horse in the 5th race. One of them has to win. It's as simple as that. And the Twitter tipsters kind of work under the same system, whereby if they win, they are gods, and when they lose, they disappear into the night, tail between their legs, and they're never heard of anymore. It's classic confirmation bias. I don't know. But Andy Robson tips. And you might say, but Andy Robson isn't horse racing. Andy Robson is football. Well, nah. Have a guess what Andy Robson is now an expert in. Andy Robson is now an expert in horse racing, or so he says. By the way, before I go further down the Andy Robson route, I'm not going to spend too much time on him or them, or they, them, those people, Fanwave Digital in this episode, because I spent enough time in the last 2. But if you've looked for BashCash 213 on YouTube, I know some people listen to their podcasts on YouTube and you can't find it. Guess what? Well, I invited Fanwave Digital onto the podcast to defend themselves after I did some critique of their mathematics, which is objective, right? I mean, 1 + 1 = 2, whether you like it or not. So we had an objective look at their mathematics, and then perhaps I'd missed something, or perhaps I was unfair. And so the world I come from, which is an academic research and development world, where you submit papers to journals and you have them critiqued. Criticism isn't always negative, it can be positive, and you have open debate, right? So I invited them on to defend themselves after the critique. And what did they do? They submitted a defamation complaint to YouTube, and YouTube took the podcast down. Amazing. It's almost like they've got something to hide. So that says more about them than it does about me. I mean, the podcast is still available elsewhere, so it doesn't matter. But Andy Robson now has renamed his name from Andy Robson Tips, specialising in football, to Andy's Cheltenham Tips. You can pre-register for my free 2024 Cheltenham Festival mailing list. Only 5,000 spots available. Is that all, Andy? Is that all? Only 5,000 spots remaining. Bear in mind, a successful tipster such as Winner Odds may have 20 spots for their service. Right? Of course, we know that this is Betfair and Paddy Power pushing their own bets that are bad for the customer through Andy Robson so that people will bet on them, and then Andy Robson will take some affiliation fee. It's just how many people are signed up to that mailing list. By the way, do you reckon they're not taking any more? They're not sending out any emails after 4,999? Do you really reckon that the limit is 5,000? Because it isn't. Anyway, he's now a specialist in Cheltenham Festival. And if he has a good Cheltenham Festival, which he could, even sending bad bets, my God, are you going to hear about it? And if he has a bad Cheltenham Festival, you're not going to hear about it. So you're either not going to hear about it, or you're going to hear it's great, but you're not going to hear that it's bad, because that's not how these things work. So be careful out there. The streets are dangerous. There's going to be so many of these tipsters. Moosh. Who's Moosh? I don't know, but I saw a video of him dancing after a horse won. If the tipster dances after a horse wins, then he's too invested in the race. You know, way too invested. And then showing off about it. What about when the natural losing run comes up? Is it going to show a video of him being miserable, like 30 in a row at 10-1 shots, which could easily happen to every winning punter? And he seems to be in some sort of apartment in this video. I had it on Twitter. I reposted it. I said once, my grandfather once said, never trust tips from a man who needs to keep his washing machine by his TV, because he's got a TV, and this studio apartment seems to be, I don't know, in Thailand or something like that. I don't know. It just doesn't look British. It looks hot because he's wearing white shorts and he's topless and got a stupid tan. And his washing machine's right next to his TV. How much rent do you think that studio apartment is a month? £200 a month? Why would you trust the tips of somebody that lives in a £200 a month apartment? I'm sorry, but any tipster worth his salt has to have had some sort of modicum of success up until now, where they're not living in an apartment where the washing machine is next to the television. That's a strict rule of thumb that you could use. Also, his name's Moosh. Like Moosh. His name's Moosh. And also put some clothes on. And also stop dancing around when the horse wins. Nobody does that. Well, no, actually, that's a lie. See, I'm not a massive fan of horse racing, but I get it. Like, if I was on a Lucky 50 in the last horse one, I would dance around. I just feel like he does it for every horse. Like, this was a 7-2 single that he was dancing around for. So who do you rely on? I mean, look, in order to work out whether someone's long-term profitable or not, you either have to have a tangible belief system into the reason why they have an edge, or they have to be independently proofed over a reasonable enough sample size. Now, the second part's hard, because there's the reasonable enough sample size. No, there haven't been enough Cheltenhams for people just to specialise in Cheltenham, like Andy Robson's going to. Not that he's tracking his tips anyway, but there hasn't been enough races to flatten out that variance. So it doesn't matter really if somebody is pointing to a few Cheltenhams or not and saying they're up or they're down. Good tipsters can lose, bad tipsters can win at bad prices. It doesn't mean they're long-term profitable. So what about those that have a tangible edge? What you have to really ask yourself is does this guy on Twitter have any better information than the head of racing at any of the big bookmakers, at BetVictor, at Coral? And by the way, it's not just one of them, it's all of them. Because if one of them receives some information that a particular horse is overpriced, he's going to cut it, and if he cuts it, everyone's going to cut it. And by no time whatsoever, that information will have hit the exchanges, the exchange price comes down, and automated software will be cutting those odds. So to be profitable, you have to be more knowledgeable than the collective of the head traders in horse racing at all of the bookmakers. What is the salary for the head trader at BetVictor? It's a lot. It's more than whatever you just answered. Take that answer and multiply that by a lot, and that's the answer. Same at Star Sports. Same at Coral. You got all of those guys, really experienced horse racing experts in their field with contacts, and that's the second part. You see, there is a tipster I've used in the past, Neil Channing over at Betting Emporium, long-term ROI, similar in horse racing to the Bookie Bashing Tracker, which not really tipsters because we're not looking at individual horses. We are just looking at each way profitable bets here, right? Whereas those guys may be tipping win only on the exchange sometimes in races where there's no each way value, which there certainly isn't in a lot of the shorter races. So why does Channing have an edge? Well, he used to be a bookmaker. He understands how to price up a horse race. He understands all of the concepts of the value that exists in each way betting. And importantly, he has contacts. He's able to talk to people that you're not able to. And that Moosh, whoever Moosh is on TikTok, isn't able to. Moosh, in his £200 a month apartment, isn't phoning up contacts of Gordon Elliott to find out how a horse has slept last night. He isn't, right? He just isn't. And Moosh doesn't have more knowledge about pricing up a horse race and the handicapping and the edges, the draw bias and all of that shenanigans. He doesn't have any more knowledge of that than the collective of the heads of racing at the bookmakers, and therefore it's very easy to ignore Moosh. It's also very easy to laugh at him with his silly fake tan, white shorts and his washing machine next to his television. It's really, really easy. It's fun as well, and we should all laugh at Moosh, because Moosh is a charlatan, and we laugh at charlatans to stop them being charlatans and to teach all the other charlatans that they shouldn't charlatan. So I do trust Neil Channing, and he charges quite a lot for his tips at Cheltenham. I think they're £200 a month, and they're worth every penny. And he's extremely knowledgeable and successful long-term and knows exactly what he's doing. And I understand why Neil's got an edge through both of his experience and his contacts. Those two things, experience and contacts. I understand where his edge comes from. I don't have it. I don't have the contacts. I have a very small component of it, which is the understanding of the each way value that he has, and we use that in the Bookie Bashing Horse Racing Tracker. For what return on investment? A very similar one to Emporium, 5% over a seriously large sample size, 100,000 horses. But what about the last few years at Cheltenham? That's a tiny sample size. I shouldn't really look at it, but I'm gonna, and I did a little video on it. It's up in the latest news. But just to summarize this, Cheltenham Festival's 2021, 22, 23. We didn't start documenting. The tracker was up in 2020, but we didn't download the data back in those days, so I don't have the data for that year. It simply has been lost to the midst of time. But what do we see on those three festivals? One, I mean, what did we say for however many races it is? Don't be fooled by these sample sizes. A lot of favourites won in the last few years. They did. A lot of short-priced favourites won in the last few years. If you looked at last year, Constitution Hill, 1.36. Gaillard du Steel, 1.9. El Fabiolo, 2.1. Delta Work, 2.1. Energoam, 2.1. Even worse the year before, with Alaho, 1.57. Sir Gerhard, 1.73. Honeysuckle, 1.73. Bob Ollinger, 2.2. The year before that, Monkfish, 1.25. Shishkin, 1.44. Appreciate It, 1.73. Honeysuckle, 2.1. Bob Ollinger, 2.5. Mega short and lots of short-priced favourites. Lots of horses under 2-1. 8 horses under 2-1 last year. 7 horses under 2-1 the year before. And when so many favourites win, we're generally not on them. And there's only 25, 26, 27, 28 races, whatever it is. And if that many races are being won by favourites, we can only really find the value in the races that the favourites don't win. Not that we know that they're going to win them up front, although for 1.25, we can guess that there's a 75% chance. In 2021 and in 2022, by the time we got to the Friday of Cheltenham, we were losing. Now, these are... Everyone's on different bets because it's a dynamic tracker. You look at the tracker at different times. You see different bets. I understand that, right? So these are bets taken at exactly 12 p.m. It's 6 bookmakers, Bet365, Betfair, William Hill, Ladbrokes, Sky Bet, and Paddy Power. So just those 6 bookmakers, if you were betting on those, every horse, all of those, and that could mean some duplicate horses, you would have been down by the Friday, which kind of sucks, right? I mean... You should be understanding variance good enough to know that that's still perfectly acceptable over that many races. But betting to win £200, you'd have been £100 down by the 305 at Cheltenham in 2021. You would have been 120. That's £200 to win on each horse. £122 down on the 210 at Cheltenham on Friday the next year in 2022. It was a little bit easier going last year because got off to a fairly decent start, and then any downswing was using the profits from that. So overall profits from those years, I think it was like 2.7 horses per race per bookmaker for about 1,700 horses in total, and it was £1,086 profit in year one, £1,279 in 2022, £2,400 in 2023, with the biggest downswing in there. Well, we were £1,200 down from starting position, but from the highest position, there's about a £2,500 loss in there. So you might want to consider maybe an overall bankroll of £5,000. Might not be bust if it was just every race at Cheltenham using the bookie bashing tracker. And each of the last 3 years has been in profit for an overall return on investment of 9.9% on average. Does that mean we're going to win this year? No. Very easily could have lost. Very easily could have lost in any of the last 3 years. Does that mean we're going to get 9.99% this year? No. It's averages out on singles at 5%. If you can get them into multiples, it now depends on odds ranges and EV, but maybe 20% wouldn't be unreasonable in your lucky 15s and things like that. Which bookmakers have been profitable and unprofitable? Last year, Paddy Power, Betfair Sportsbook, cleaned up. The punters lost a lot to them. At least the bookie bashing punters did. Very heavily. Sky Bet had a couple of years, 2021 and 2022, where you would have lost money regardless of the fact that they seem to have 1, 2, 3, 4 extra places in every single race. Mad, right? Ladbrokes, who have fewer extra places, turned out to be the most profitable in nearly every year. Betfred was the most profitable last year. The most profitable year in total being 2022 at Ladbrokes, with over 100% ROI. Let's all laugh at the value bets to be found at Ladbrokes and how much money was taken out of them there. So that's kind of cool, because with lots of favourites winning, you would assume that recreational punters should lose. Sorry, recreational punters should win, and professional punters should lose, and bookmakers should lose. Yeah, with the bookie bashing tracker, we still managed to eke out 9.99% in those 2 years. What about the BB algo versus the default metric? This is the way that we price up place probability. Well, the BB algo has been outperforming the default metric. Does that mean that it's better? No, not at Cheltenham. No, it doesn't. There's no reason for the BB algo to be more profitable than the default metric, because the default metric uses a liquid exchange, and at Cheltenham it is a liquid exchange. And BB algo uses regression analysis without looking at things like race composition. There's no reason at Cheltenham for the BB algo to be more accurate than the exchange. It won't be. It shouldn't be. And it's been more profitable. What does that say to us? It says that we can see signal whether it is noise. And other tipsters may have picked this up, and they may have pushed it as, look how profitable we are. So I'll tell you this. Last year, just using the BB algo metric, you made £3,930 using the BB algo, £2,400 using the default metric. What am I going to promote to you? I'm going to promote to you, use the default metric this year. Use the metric that has been less profitable than it was last year, because last year got lucky. And that's another thing you should be looking out for with any tipster that you might be following. If they've won money in the past, can they acknowledge if that money is more or less than what they expected to win? Neil Channing does a great write-up at Betting Emporium about what they expect to win long term and where they are now compared to that. And I'm telling you now, BB Algo last year shouldn't have won as much money as it did, but it's a small sample size and it got lucky. Okay? So, whatever you're doing at Cheltenham, just keep an eye on who and what you're using to inform your bets. And if they smell like a charlatan, and they look like a charlatan, and they dance around in their white stupid trousers in a flat with a washing machine next to the television, then they almost certainly are a charlatan. King of the hill of exchanges for years and years was Betfair Exchange. That Betfair that was started up back in the early 2000s for peer-to-peer betting for winners and people that didn't want to bet at the sportsbook, and then they turned into a sportsbook and added a casino and then restricted everybody and added a premium charge and then drove it into the ground, and everybody hates Betfair, including me. In the meantime, the three alternatives of Matchbook, Betdaq and Smarkets have been playing catch-up, but in recent times we have very much noticed a shift in available liquidity across the exchanges. One of the reasons we've noticed this is that it's been harder to find value on the DP World Tour using the golf tracker at bookiebashing.net. Why? Have the bookies' margins got higher? Have they got better at pricing up odds? No and no, neither of those things. The reason is because one of the input sources we use is Betfair Exchange, and quite simply, liquidity at Betfair Exchange has been moving. It started with horse racing. I believe there has been... Now, look, I was told this and didn't write it down. So if I get it right or wrong, don't hold it against me. I'm talking to you like I'm talking to my mate in the pub. None of this is legally binding. It wasn't me, Your Honour. I wasn't even the country. Net spreken de English. But I think either Matchbook, and I think it was Matchbook, but it could have been Betdaq, persuaded a lot of the on-course horse racing bookmakers to switch over from Betfair over to that exchange. And as a result, we've seen a real shift in available liquidity. Now, make up your own mind whether there is fancy reporting here, whether a single trade of a £5 bet between you and me is £5 traded or £10 traded, because we both traded. But there is only the same £5 note, Schrodinger's fire. But the back liquidity is claimed to now be highest at Matchbook, with Betfair in second and Betdaq catching up, and the lay liquidity is highest at Matchbook, with Betfair in second and Betdaq even closer than the back liquidity. And that's a real shift after all of these years. We looked at the golf, and Betfair was now number 2 liquidity in terms of the amount traded. Although there is a mad thing that in a couple of tournaments we see that the Smarkets prices are way under the other two, which means you could technically back at, say, Matchbook or Betfair and lay at Smarkets and arbitrage the exchanges to death if that's what you wanted to do. I wonder sometimes if that's because they've got that 0% comms offer on for people that use Odds Monkey, and so lots of non-arbitrage players are using Smarkets, and as a result they're just value betting a lot of outright win-only prices there and bringing them down. I do not know. In terms of the probability of an exchange being the best price on the back price, it's pretty much neck and neck with Betfair, Betdaq being slightly under, with the lay price Matchbook as the best price. On football, it still is Betfair with the most amount of one match odds back liquidity, but it's getting closer, very close in lay liquidity, with Matchbook just a little bit behind Betfair. So, I mean, it's getting there, and Betdaq just behind Matchbook. So, there's definitely something going on where the other three exchanges were playing catch-up for years, and now they're catching up. I think people are sick to the back teeth of Betfair not working, of a lot of draconian KYC regulations. By the way, hands up, I got my source of wealth sorted at Smarkets, so I slagged them off when it happened. And it took way too long to get sorted, and there were unreasonable requests. And I do wonder if my platform gave me a little bit of acceleration through the process, but whatever happened, it's fully verified, and I'm able to bet there again now. So, yeah, I've just got to be transparent there, because I did slag them off and say that there was a problem before, and that problem has been solved, and I haven't updated on that, so now I have. Betfair really dropped the ball here. They had such a monopoly, and they could have continued that. But everyone, hey, why don't they put up more markets in football games? I mean, somebody's made the decision to restrict the number of markets available to, herd the sheep of liquidity into particular markets. But I think it's working for the other exchanges, and it's so annoying for people that want to bet in those particular markets that they don't even exist on Betfair. I've got no sympathy for them. Ever since they put that sportsbook together and put the casino up and then locked my account years and years and years ago, which is still locked and will never be reopened, and I don't even care about it anymore. So, the one thing I do prefer about Betfair over the other three is the price history graph. That's the best at Betfair, but other than that, that's the only thing they've got going for them. And they're maybe a little bit more liquid in other markets. Now, the other three are really focusing on enhanced specials, and I think this is a good idea by them, because whilst they may be attracting some sharp punters to those markets that might just be taking money out of the ecosystem and not putting it back in, so someone's got to replenish that. If the match bettors are losing by taking bad prices to the advantage players that are winning by taking good prices. I did have a conversation with a couple of the exchanges saying, in the past, you've had rather, a tight-fisted view on those that back on enhanced special markets. I think one of them tried to start charging commission of like 25%, 30% or something like that to anyone that wanted to do that, which would have eroded any edge unless you're betting 130% EV or more. And my argument was, you've got to allow people to learn the ropes of the exchange when they're only used to risk-free betting, arbitrage betting, match betting, free bet, stuff like that. If that's all they've been used to, if you want to start getting them into the exchange and playing a little bit more, which is inherently going to involve some risk, there does need to be some stepping stones for that. And a good stepping stone to me seems to be the enhanced specials market, because it's kind of easy to understand where the value is coming from, and that allows you to get into the more standard markets where it's a lot harder to understand where the value is coming from, and your confidence of using the exchange has to be a lot higher. So these enhanced special markets are great. I've been playing around with them myself. Under both Betdaq and Matchbook, they have the market called enhanced specials, which I understand a couple of years ago was the third biggest sport for Matchbook. Under Smarkets, it's under the actual sport, so you got football and then it's specials under that. Betdaq seem to have so many, but less liquidity, but they've got like the most by far. Like, it's a Thursday today, which traditionally isn't that great a day for stuff happening, and they've got like Henderson fouls, they've got a match trebles, they've got Liverpool 2 shots on target in each half and Liverpool 2 corners in each half. They've got a few more trebles. The trebles tend to be the lesser value because they're easier to work out, because any Joe Schmo can multiply 3 lay prices together on the liquid exchange, and so you don't need a specialized calculator or model or distribution to work out where the value is in a treble, and then therefore they tend to be efficient. Not always efficient. There was some value there on the weekend, and Liverpool scored a 99th minute winner for that to come in. It was Newcastle, Liverpool and Tottenham at some price. You've got Scorecast. You've got teams to win and player to score there. You've got a couple of players to score. That took ages to work out the maths of that, by the way. 2 players to score in a game. But there, that can be done now on bookie bashing, and 2 players to get shot on target. Uses now the same shots on target. You got Liverpool 10 plus shots on target versus Sparta Prague. I wonder what that is. I'm just going to pop over to our bet builder because I'm always fascinated by these ones. that sits under, annoyingly and stupidly, BB player shots on target. Just kind of dumb, but it just is what it is. So if I bring that up, player shots on target, and it's what even competition are Liverpool in these days? Is it the Europa League? Or is it? Yeah, it is the Europa League. And player Liverpool, I know it's dumb, and over 9 shots on target is 18.78. So the exchange has a back at 7 and a lay at 10. So that 10's a value bet. Nearly 200% value EV, but I'm not laying at 10. It's not fun for me. You got Luis Diaz, 2+ shots on target. Fouls committed can now be done by bookie bashing. There's quite a few of those around. Make sure you're taking them for players you're pretty confident will start or after team news. You've got a few tennis bets, players to win 2-0, which again can be done in the bet builder. It doesn't have to be a liquid exchange because we're taking last price match in a lot of these as long as they're between the back and the lay. So those can be done. There's a few darts. There's more shots on target. There's so many. There's Willie Mullins to train 10+ winners at the Cheltenham Festival, which is the one that I haven't worked out yet because I could work it out, but it's just going to involve going through every single race and categorizing them. So they've got billions over at Matchbook. And then the second biggest exchange in terms of these specials is Matchbook, which has a few less tonight, but it's still got fouls and it's got match accumulators and darts accumulators and the same Willie Mullins bet. I mean, the same bets do tend up to go on Matchbook and Betdaq. And then over at Smarkets, if you go into specials underneath football, you'll see that they've got a couple up for the Ajax-Aston Villa match. Things like a team to win, get the most corners and get the most cards. We've been doing that for ages on the bet builder, right? And normally you've been getting 105, 110% EV or it's been an efficient market. But recently they've been 120, 130% EV. And someone asked, reasonably in my opinion, has anything changed and is the calculation not right anymore? No, nothing's changed. I think what's changed is there's more layers in the market. That's why we're getting 120%, 130%. So Marseille win, Marseille most corners, Montpellier most cards, 5-2 to back, 4.1 was the fair odds of that. Fiorentina to win, Fiorentina most corners. And it's usually the fave to win, fave most corners, and dog most cards. Lazio most cards, 9.6 to back, and 7.4 fair odds. Really decent bets here. By the way, that Marseille one came in. That doesn't matter, but it came in. Inter to win, Inter most corners. Atletico most cards, 5.3. Loads of money to back on the exchange, 4.1 fair odds. And that one won as well. So there's been a shift. There's been a market shift, both in the amount of enhanced specials that are available, but also seemingly in the liquidity that are coming into these three exchanges. Possibly this drive from both sides, from backers and layers. Many people thought, well, this is a bad idea because it's going to erode any edge for the backers. It's possible what we might see is the opposite. It's a good idea because you've got more recreational lay money in, taking whatever price that's one nick underneath what they're backing at, and that's providing some real value for the backers. So get involved. I do believe there is plenty to go around. A lot of these won't be on the bet tracker. A lot of these you're going to have to go and find and work out the value yourselves. And if you've got a bookie bashing subscription and the bet builder, not all of them, but like 90% of them, you can work out the value and monitor them for steaming in on private trackers. Available to all at bookiebashing.net. Gambling and chat. 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 Right, so this week on the BashCast, Abbie MacGregor and Andrew Woodman from the Gamblers Consumer Forum join us. Hello to both of you guys.
Hi there.
Hi.
Last saw you both at the Smart Bash event that we did last year, where you had the great presentation about the objectives and principles behind the Gamblers Consumer Forum. Now, since then, there's been a lot of lead up into a debate that didn't know was going to happen or not, because it relied on the petition to the government getting 100,000 signatures, and for a long time it didn't look like it was going to get 100,000 signatures, but it got there in the end. And this was the debate in Parliament over financial risk checks in gambling. Now, do you guys know much about the outcome of that debate, because, or even what happened during it? Because it was last Monday, I think, the 26th of February.
Yes, I did a mini review for the website, which you can find on our gamblersconsumerforum.com. It was fairly standard stuff where the MPs, mostly on the Conservative side, although Conor McGinn also gave a very good address from the Labour side, they put forward a positive case for racing. And the usual sort of antis came out, Carolyn Harris and a couple of SNP guys. And they put the anti-side, but what was quite noticeable with the anti-side, that they were still using statistics which have been debunked by Public Health England, especially around sort of suicides, which Philip Davis tried to raise with Paul Bromfield, I think, Sheffield MP. It was still using 400. So, Public Health England are saying no, but they wouldn't have it. So they are absolutely wedded to these statistics, which have, who's being generous, their credibility has certainly been brought into question. What was obviously you get MPs who sort of do a bit of to and fro and that sort of thing. I think three of the most interesting responsive contributions, obviously following Philip Davis, who gave his usual very good performance because he actually gets it. George Freeman was interesting. So he's a Conservative MP, used to be a life science minister, and he was talking about using AI and actually putting some alternative, one of the alternatives, which I'm sure Abbie will be talking greater depth about, but which we've been looking at. The Shadow Minister, arguably the most interesting person in the room, because you look at the polls and she may be the one who finally implements all of this. She asked a few interesting questions. We've been in a round table with her, which she was in with various members of racing and horse race bettors forum, people like that. So it felt like that they're sort of listening, not actually giving too much of a position yet. And unfortunately, Stuart Andrew, he pretty much gave the DCMS line, and he's doesn't seem to be. I think he wants to long grass it until he's out of office. So he's announced this pilot will go on for 6 months. That will probably take us to the election. So I think
that's a shame, because I thought I had high hopes that Stuart Andrew and Lucy Fraser were perhaps going to be quite, if you like, on our side or on the side of common sense. But you feel like maybe he's now just got one eye on the end of his term.
Well, given what he said to the recent Gambling with Lives forum, it would appear that he's been house trained by the civil service to give their line, and I don't think he's got the will to actually argue with them.
Yeah. What did he say to the what was the comment that he passed there?
That in the debate.
Yeah.
He basically talks about a part. These speeches are always written by civil servants. So certainly in the Gambling with Lives debate, he was quoting a figure of 2.5% for problem gambling, which is a new survey which has been conducted with the Gambling Commission, which by the time this goes out, the letter will probably be out, but we're sending an open letter to the Gambling Commission saying, do they stand by this statistic? Because you extrapolate it, you're looking at up to 1.7 million people being classified as problem gamblers. That doesn't feel right.
No, that sounds like a lot. Does that compare at all to other industries with addictions, the drinking industry and things like that?
Do you want to take that, Abbie?
Yes, no, I'll take that. Yes. So in terms of, it's really a case of how we're going to frame the way that we talk about addiction. So addiction is not something that you get or something that can be created. It's something that is in your cognitive construction. And when you speak to people who are in addiction recovery or those who have gone through addiction recovery, they will acknowledge that the way that their brain works, the way that they respond to these various addictive agents are different from how you or I would respond to them. And that quite adequately explains why we have an addictive product that not everybody is addicted to. And so there are quite higher levels of problem drinkers because naturally more people do it. But on the whole, the rate of addiction is a very small percentage of the population. It usually lingers around the 1%, 2% mark. But what we're seeing now is the growth of this pseudoscience, where there's those who have been clinically classified as having an addiction, and those are genuine cases. And of course, they deserve and require assistance that we can give them. But you've got this swell of other groups who are quite happy to expand the definition of addiction to fit their narrative that these industries are inherently harmful. So, by expanding the definition of addiction, by taking it away from a clinical definition and giving it a more kind of social definition, whereby so for example, one of the harm markers for the patterns of play is gambles a lot at night or gambles a lot on payday. These are all things that are very, very subclinical. So in terms of how does it compare to other addictions, it's a very difficult question to answer because it is very difficult to ascertain in these figures who are the genuine cases that have been diagnosed by a clinician and who are those that show signs that are subclinical or that are purely financial. Losing a lot of money does not make you an addict. It might just mean you are simply unlucky. Drinking a lot of alcohol does not necessarily make you an alcoholic. If you have a compulsion to drink alcohol and you are unable to stop, then yes, I would say that is a sound sign of an issue with drinking. But the figures we have now are based on alcohol units consumed. And that to me just suggests that this is just simply a measuring exercise, trying to measure how much people are drinking, how much sugar people are consuming, how much people are smoking. Give it an arbitrary figure to say, okay, well, if you drink this much, you must be an addict, despite the fact these thresholds often have no scientific basis. And then instead of perhaps having a population of 1% who were addicted, you've got perhaps 8%. And of course, the issue with that is we don't have the resources or the infrastructure as a country or a health service to be able to accommodate 8% addicted population. So there is no point creating these inflated figures because we don't have the resources or the money to accommodate them. And so bookmakers have so much data about problem gamblers. And so that in itself renders affordability checks unnecessary because we can see when individuals are showing troubling signs of potential addiction.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah. And sorry,
the
go on,
problem
Abbie.
this is the problem with addiction. The reason why it's so difficult to accept that you have it is because people want to hide their addictions. They don't want to admit their addictions. They want to do it discreetly so they can continue with their addictions. And so what you're doing, what bookmakers have been tasked with, whether it's their responsibility or not to find these people is another question entirely, but they have been asked to find a needle in a haystack. They're trying to find that addict among healthy gamblers. The problem when you inflate the definition of addiction and you include statistics that are plainly false or have been manipulated to suit an agenda is all you're doing is adding more hay. So Gambling with Lives believe that they are helping people by including essentially everyone can be an addict. Everyone could be one bet away from addiction, but they're actually making it harder. They're making that by expanding the group of people this could apply to, you are making it harder to help the people who genuinely need that help.
Yeah, I mean, the basis of the problem that we're in just now is the government committed on reducing gambling harm, and yet there is no, I don't believe anyway, there is no accepted definition of what is counted as an addict across, gambling or alcoholism or things like that. I spoke to one clinical psychologist who suggested that one of the main problems in addiction is somebody that is trying to use their addiction or their addictive nature to escape a problem in their life, meaning that I could gamble and you could gamble and we could have exactly the same bets down. And if you're using it as a means to escape something in life, you're an addict and I'm not. And it could be a reasonable definition, but you're not going to be able to apply that on a case-by-case basis across 50 million people across the country. So it is interesting that we're in a position just now where the definition of this is so important, but nobody's going to come up with an accepted definition. It's also interesting, I think, the drinks companies, how definitely in England and Scotland, they have differed in their approach to problem drinking. What was it? I heard you speaking about this on Luck on Sunday, Abbie. What were the main differences between the approaches in Scotland and England with the alcohol companies?
Well, so in Scotland, they have introduced minimum alcohol pricing, with the view that if you make alcohol more expensive, it will act as a deterrent for people to purchase as much of it. But as we know from here, history is littered with examples of where blanket measures did not work. If you have a specific problem in specific individuals, it's complete common sense that that is going to require a targeted approach, because otherwise you are treating people for an addiction that they do not have. So what happened in Scotland was the price of alcohol increased, and the problem with the nanny state is that the nanny state believes that people will behave the way the policy wants it to. So the nanny state says, right, we want to reduce the amount of people drinking alcohol or as much alcohol, so we're going to increase the price of alcohol. And that assumes the only thing that people will do will reduce the amount of alcohol that they buy. But of course, we are human, and we behave we do not behave in a computerized way. And so what people started doing, those who were addicted to alcohol, is they realized that they needed to fund their addiction. They needed more money to do so. So rather than buying food, they bought the more expensive alcohol instead. So you ended up making the problem far, far worse, because you had problem drinkers who were, yes, they were drinking too much, but now you have problem drinkers who have poor diets, discrepancies in their diets, because they are displacing their food purchases to go and buy that more expensive alcohol. As a result of that, alcohol-related deaths in Scotland are at a 14-year high. When you compare that with England, we talked about minimum alcohol pricing in England back in 2001, and we talked about restrictions on advertising. But there was a more sensible discussion about it. There was an acknowledgement of the unintended consequences of these big intrusive policies. So the government got the drinks companies around the table and they said, look, here is the issue. What are we going to do about it? And the drinks companies said, look, we run a business and we have to make money. So we can't just cut our advertising. And also an acknowledgement, and a fair one, that the drinks industry doesn't just employ people who are directly involved in the drinks industry. We're talking about pubs, we're talking about restaurants, we're talking about anything that has some sort of drinking outlet, which is most things nowadays. So they sat around and they said, look, we're willing to compromise on the advertising. We will do a soft sell approach to advertising. So we won't glamorize the act of drinking. We will simply we will simply sell and advertise our product. And that has been confirmed by recent research that advertising doesn't make people drink, it just helps them select a product. And so this narrative that advertising compels you to do things just by sheer virtue of watching it is utterly false, because that assumes that humans have no free will whatsoever. It assumes that people who don't have a driving license will go out and buy a car because they saw a funky Range Rover advert. So they agreed that they would do a soft sell of advertising.
If I can draw on a personal experience there, because, and I think there's so many lessons that the gambling industry needs to learn from the drinks industry because of the comparisons between them. But back in November, I had a little bit of trauma last year, and I found unexpectedly, because I always thought I had a lot of self-control in my life, I was drinking every single day, every day. It wasn't a lot, but it was every single day. And I made the decision I needed to curb this, and I found it harder than expected. What made me stop? Education. I listened to about 3 or 4 quite long podcasts, people like Andrew Huberman, people like Chris Williamson, and I understood the effects on my brain, my liver, and everything else, my energy, my sleep. A major thing was my sleep, my overall mood. And through that education, I just quit. In December, I just quit. And I'm nearly about 80 days in just now, feeling great. I'm going to have a drink again one day. It was the education that made me stop. And I see drinks. I go out with my friends, they drink. I see advertisements for drinks. I love alcohol. I love everything about it. But at the time, it was time to stop for me, and I was able to do it. The government don't think people like me exist. The nanny states certainly don't as well. They don't think that I'm educated enough or have enough self-control to make this decision myself. And there are a lot of people that cannot, and they do need help. But there are also a lot of people like me who, with just enough education, just go, right, I now know the risks. I know I'm going to, put a little curb on it. And so much of that can apply to gambling as well. People who have lost just more than, or enough, if you like, their upper limit. There's a lot of people out there who can then just stop and say, I'm going to have a little pause just now, and I'll be back when I'm ready. And unfortunately, the nanny state, the government, a lot of the SNP and Carolyn Harris simply don't think that a significant amount of the population has that amount of willpower or self-preservation. What particularly do you think the gambling industry, I mean, this is all about alternatives to affordability checks, because without that, we're just going to have the affordability checks. Is that correct? Or is it a case that we're going to get the affordability checks and we're just going to have to deal with them one way or another?
No, I mean, I think that that's a really important point, and that is something that we've always advocated for. We demonstrated with the petition that there is a swell of opposition against affordability checks, and that is very important because sometimes public opinion can affect policy. But that, unfortunately, is not enough, because nowadays we have, with the internet and social media, we have vast numbers of people signing petitions. Some petitions get 5 million signatures. Even back in decades ago with the Iraq War, you had people on the streets 1 million strong protesting. So just to have numbers is not enough. You need ideas as well. Yeah. Because the government have made a manifesto commitment to reducing gambling harm. And they are not going to leave an empty black hole and a void when they've taken away affordability checks, just to say, okay, we'll forget it. We're going to get rid of affordability checks. We've got no alternative. Let's just leave things the way they are. They have acknowledged.
So the box needs ticked. They need to say they've reduced gambling harm.
And look, we live in a post-COVID era where people believe it is the responsibility of the government to take care of its citizens. That's in itself a sort of separate existential debate. I don't believe that's true. But nonetheless, that is the political landscape in which we live. So the government need to be seen to be doing something. And that is a trend we see a lot in all policy areas. But what we've got to try and escape from is this idea that implementing a bad policy is better than no policy at all. And to be frank, it is a bad policy, because anytime you ask any questions, any kind of scrutiny applied to this policy, it absolutely falls apart. So if you ask, as we did, a DCMS official, okay, so let's say that affordability checks are brought in, and we come to you in a year's time and we say, okay, how can you show us that this destructive policy was worth it, that it had a positive effect on the outcome of addicts? And they responded with, well, we can't necessarily measure conclusively what one policy, the effect of one policy. And that's Politico speak for I don't know. So they don't know how this policy is going to affect the number of problem gamblers. And even if affordability checks were a fantastic solution, if they were the silver bullet that would reduce addiction, 80% of those who are asked to provide documentation do not do it. They refuse to do it. So even if affordability checks were fantastic, if no one is willing to undergo them, they are pointless. Laws are only enforceable with consent. If no one is willing to, take for example the banning of the bully dog. If no one is willing to get rid of their dogs, it won't work. People have to acknowledge that they have to do something in order to fulfill the policy. If people aren't willing to do that, the policy is pointless. It can't be enacted because it doesn't.
Now, playing devil's advocate here, because you know I'm on your side of the fence in this argument, but you could maybe point to the legislation following the Dunblane massacre, where they said, right, we're getting rid of guns and there's no choice. And that worked, but presumably that worked because 99.999% of the population got behind the reasoning of the argument.
No, absolutely, but then we have to be, that there are some people say to me all the time, 'cause I'm a libertarian, they say, oh, so you're against wearing a seatbelt then? And you think, well, no, that's the completely wrong argument. Libertarianism and respecting people's personal freedoms and trusting their personal responsibility isn't about anarchy. It's about allowing people to use their common sense. So common sense dictates that, yes, you should wear a seatbelt. Common sense also dictates that people without a license shouldn't be carrying heavy machinery and guns and whatnot. For me, that is common sense. But there also has to, we can't base these arguments on emotion. We have to base them on scientific fact. For many, many years, we thought that violent video games were creating a generation of serial killers. And actually, when we look back at the evidence, there is no correlation between the sale of violent video games and real world aggression. Even though we'd like to think that, we'd like to think that because the two are so similar, we can somehow connect them. But we are basing that on our emotions rather than what the data tells us. And that is where, and I'm glad you brought it up, that is where education is really important. And that is what our alternative is. We are asking the government to, instead of introducing blanket affordability checks, which are not in any other jurisdiction, so therefore we have no evidence that they're actually going to work, we are asking the government, and indeed the shadow minister, who appears to be a lot more interested in this idea, if they will commission an app that will help gamblers with their addiction. We know that strategies like this work because the drinks industry implemented a campaign called Drink Aware. It had an app and it had a website, and you will find it on the back of every beverage produced in the UK. And people can go on and they can see, actually, is my drinking a problem? If I need help, where can I get it? How can I talk about my loved ones with this? Where's the local clinic? What's the process that I have to go through? Or am I just someone who likes a bit of a drink? We have to. When I did a focus group about smoking, and I said, so you know that smoking is bad for you. Smoking is indiscriminately bad for you. Why do you still smoke? And they said, because I like it. Because I get pleasure from putting the cigarette to my lips and blowing out smoke. And of course, not everyone is going to understand that. I personally find the practice unpleasant, but there has to be an acknowledgement that for some people, they get pleasure out of doing these things. And that is a perfectly natural thing. We are hardwired as human beings to run away from pain and seek pleasure. That is a scientific fact. And so actually what we have to do is we have to get much better at educating. We have to work out how do we properly identify those that need help and realize that by including other people in the group of those who genuinely need help, you are actually making it actively harder. And by keeping people in a state of being angry at the industry, you are keeping them in addiction. Because being angry at the industry serves no purpose in your recovery. You have to acknowledge that you have a problem and you have to go and seek that help. But there's now a kind of well-funded machine in place, a well-funded campaign machine that seeks to exclusively blame the industry. Now, there are things the industry does that are probably very poor practice, and if we had a functioning gambling commission, they would address those. But unfortunately, the Gambling Commission behaves more like an enforcement agency than it does a regulator. A regulator is supposed to protect the interests of the consumer. That's its job. It's the consumer's advocate,
Yeah.
not the anti-gambling zealots advocate
Yeah,
or the
it's not meant to
NHS.
be a quango, but that's what it's turned into.
Exactly. And so actually, if the Gambling Commission were doing their jobs properly, then perhaps these gambling companies wouldn't be able to prey on those that are addicted. But the solution to that is not to somehow falsely equate financial loss with addiction. Because if we then apply that to other addictions, again, let's go back to the alcohol industry. If I go and buy a bottle of £100 champagne, does that make me more of an alcoholic than someone who's buying 90 pence fruit cider? Absolutely not. And so we have decided to base an entire policy framework on something that looks good and sounds good rather than something that will actually work. And we are so hell-bent on presenting a virtuous policy that we are willing to damage industries and write them off as collateral damage.
I mean, that's 2024 all over. Virtuosity reigns. It does. But so going to your idea of an app, just exploring this a little bit better, there are obviously logistical issues about how it would be accessible to different demographics and things like that. But essentially, I have had a bit of a bad Cheltenham and chased my losses. And I've found myself in a little bit of a place where I'm uncomfortable with the amount of money that I've maybe deposited and lost on the horse racing. Can you talk me through the process with which this app could enable me to sort of educate myself on better decision making?
Well, just going to your first point of demographics, we actually did some polling by YouGov to test how this app would be received. And it was published in the Sun newspaper, and it got the attention of the Shadow Minister for Gambling, Stephanie Peacock. And it showed that an overwhelming 68% of the UK public would support our app in an attempt to reduce gambling harm. And it also found that 54% of 18 to 24-year-olds, which is what the age group the government defined as being most vulnerable to gambling harm, they agreed it would be an effective measure. And so the point about doing the app is not to replace a nanny state policy with another nanny state policy. because it's targeted and it's voluntary. And it follows along the same lines of successful addiction recovery methods like Alcoholics Anonymous. The government seem to believe in order for something to be successful, you have to make it compulsory. You have to make it apply to everybody. Whereas Alcoholics Anonymous is completely voluntary, yet it works. And this app will also be voluntary. You'll be able to download it onto a phone, or you could, or for those who don't have smartphones, maybe if you're of an older generation, there'll be a website, and it is essentially an education hub where you can look at the actual clinical symptoms of addiction. I think you mentioned before when you were talking about what makes an addict in terms of drinking. We partnered up with a clinician called Dr. Robert Lefevre, who's treated over 5,000 addiction patients, and he showed us the questionnaire that he uses to identify those who are addicted. And he said it's nothing to do with when you gamble, how much you gamble, what you gamble on. What it's to do with is your compulsion to gamble. And so he said a good example is, would you rather give up gambling or give up a close friendship? Now, if you're not addicted to gambling, well, you obviously don't want to give up gambling if it's a hobby of yours, but you'd be unlikely to want to give up a close friendship. Whereas if you are utterly compelled to gamble, you will give up anything to be able to gamble. And so the app will be a place where we can actually have sound scientific and clinical definitions of what an addict is. And if you then feel that you fit that bill, you can then use the app to progress in your next stage of recovery. So we've got some recovering addicts who have backed the idea of this app and who are working with us, and we are hoping that they will write some articles about what they went through to create that support network that we know is so important in addiction recovery. We have charities that we're working with who help those who are addicted to gambling, who are helping us put things together for the app. You'd have a postcode finder where you could find your nearest addiction recovery clinic. And to be absolutely clear to the Twitter critics, this app has not been made. We are not making any money from it. We are simply presenting it to the government for them to make it, because we do not want companies to make it. We want it to be a health initiative, because we do not want it to be corrupted by those whose starting point is that gambling is inherently harmful. We have to acknowledge that there are those that need help, but we also have to acknowledge that a sensible approach is required. And if we keep going down this route, we are going to end up in a place that is utterly nonsensical. So we have, for example, at the moment, the anti-money laundering measures that are applicable to gambling transactions, apart from the fact that they are already undertaken by a bank when you deposit any money into your account. So it's actually being done twice, and being used as an excuse by bookmakers to not pay out, which again is something that the Gambling Commission, if they were fully functional and they worked as a regulator should, and they adhered to the regulator's code, that's something that they should be addressing. When you look at how Canada have been regulating smoking, their most recent idea is to put smoking kills actually on the cigarette, which is completely absurd, because this is something that's going to burn. So it's going to last for, no one's going to be able to read it unless you've got eyes on your cheeks as you're smoking. And as you are smoking, what's written on the cigarette is burning away. So when you allow a argument to be dictated by the moral high ground, you end up in a completely bizarre place. But in fairness, that is not just the fault of Gambling with Lives. That is also the fault of our side for being unwilling to come up with an alternative. And that's why we did. Stomping your feet and saying no is no good. We have to learn from these campaign groups. So let's look at Animal Rising. I think we can all agree that Animal Rising are completely and utterly nuts. And their policies and their methods by which they campaign are absurd, illegal, destructive, and unhelpful. But when you ask them, what is your solution to animal cruelty? They had an answer. Now, that answer was obviously ridiculous. It would have meant that the breed of the thoroughbred breed would essentially be exterminated because there'd be no need to breed them anymore. But they did at least have an answer. And so if you have an answer and an argument you're bringing forward, you can at least have a discussion about it. You open up a dialogue.
Yeah,
If
you
they
can't
said,
just moan and say bad idea, but I don't have an alternative. The alternative has to exist.
exactly. And so if you simply say, we don't like horse racing, okay, what would you like to do about it? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then that's the conversation over. Now, it might not be the perfect alternative, but is there an alternative to gambling, to affordability checks, that is going to get rid of gambling addiction? No. There is nothing that will get rid of addiction, because if there was, we would have found it by now. So we're not looking for this perfect solution. What we're looking for is a solution that we can prove is going to help the outcome of addicts. And that solution can be based on other successful addiction recovery methods. That's why we drew our inspiration from the Drinkware app, because we know that works.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I completely agree with you that it needs to be almost neutral. It needs to be not by pro gambling advocates, or the app doesn't need to be run. The education doesn't need to be run or shouldn't be run by the bookmakers either, because they have a vested interest. So neither party, the government can run it, but you would hope that they didn't communicate it. If you remember, before COVID, Boris Johnson decided that everyone needed to go on a health kick, and so there were videos of him getting on his bike and going for a run. And I'm looking at him going, if I want exercise advice, Boris Johnson's not the man I want to turn to for it. You know, it needs to be from people possibly that understand the neurological science of why you feel the urge to redeposit £50 when you only intended on losing £50 today. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about what your actions are. It's the clinical science, not the non-clinical solutions, that need to be made available to people so that they can understand their decision making. And I'm all behind this, because this sounds so much better than the bookmaker getting in touch with you and asking for 20 years worth of bank statements to prove that you can deposit £50 a month and, you know, put that on a 1 to 10 shot. So if I can maybe look at drawing this to a close a little bit, what happens at the end of a parliamentary debate such as the one that we had last Monday? Is it as simple as a binary yes or no answer? We're going to agree with the petition, or we disagree with the petition, or are there levels of sort of stages in between where they can say there are some good ideas, but we're not going to go gung-ho and do exactly the petition asked us?
Well, the government have sort of responded, so pretty much that's it. I mean, the main purpose of the petition really was to draw attention to the issue, and you know, you'd hope that the debate flushed out a few ideas which makes the minister think. Unfortunately, like I say, I mean, we have met with DCMS civil servants, and they do seem sort of committed to the idea, even though when you ask them to flush out the idea, such as, you know, who would conduct these checks, you know, third party, who's that, don't know. You know, they've got no idea of how to. They know they want to deliver something. This is something, so they're going to try and deliver it, even though they don't know how to deliver it. So, although they've got intentions, they don't seem to have any sort of mechanism. So this is why, you know, they're looking at this pilot, and it will just sort of keep sort of limping on, as it were, for a while until they can work out some way of delivering it. So the petition was more to sort of raise awareness rather than, you know, these MPs have spoken now, we're going to change policy. It's trying to move the dial a little bit. I'll say that the most interesting person or position in this debate now is the shadow gambling minister, because it looks like it's in the long grass until the election. So it's going to be, or well, highly likely it's going to be the Labour Party who are implementing this and trying to work out what their position is going to be on it.
And of course,
Sorry,
as
Abbie.
you get as you get closer to legislation or guidance being implemented, and you actually have to build up a statutory framework for it, that's when things can potentially become quite difficult, because sometimes laws get very, very close to being enacted, but of course they have to be written. They have to be written down in a plain and simple way that is legally binding and sound. And so there are many policies that never really quite made it, even though they were a big part of a manifesto. So voter ID cards, I think that was in 2001, and it became so difficult to kind of the legalese of it all became too complex to actually get down onto a bill or get down onto paper, that they were abandoned. Another good example will be the Labour Party's idea of putting VAT on private school fees. The idea that, so at the moment they get charitable status, which, when you look at the legal argument, is perfectly reasonable, because they don't make a profit, their profit reinvested into the school. They do have a public, they do serve the public in some way, because they educate, and they don't have any shareholders, so they do actually fit the legal definition of a charity. That's why they have the charitable status. And so whether removing it is the right thing to do or not, whether you believe it's unfair or unjust, is neither here nor there. The fact is that they do uh, uphold the legal definition of a charity. So the Labour Party are going to have to write a bill that excludes private schools from the definition of charity, whilst keeping, for example, the British Heart Foundation as a charity. And that's going to be very difficult to implement, because if your definition of a charity is non-for-profit, well, so is a private school. No shareholders, well, so is a private school. Operates in the public interest, well, so does a private school. So when you actually have to get it down, that's when it could become tricky. We actually received a letter recently, which we'll put up on the website in due course for everyone to read, which said that affordability checks must not wealth screen, that was actually an illegal practice, so they cannot be used. So we've obviously heard the phrase commercial purposes floated around a lot, but wealth screening is a new one. So essentially they can't try and ascertain your income to see if you can afford to gamble. And that is exactly what affordability checks do. That's what they are. I mean, asking for someone's postcode, asking for someone's job title, that is wealth screening. That's the definition of wealth screening. And if you're going to argue that we're doing affordability checks on the basis of anti-money laundering, that has already been done by your bank. So it might prove actually to be very, very difficult to actually write these policies into law. And so we can only hope that they will face that kind of red tape legalese, and we can all have another think about it, because it's not just affordability checks that are the problem, it's the entire approach. We need to get a lot more people around the table who actually work with these people, who actually worked with lived experience, who actually work with addicts. We spoke to someone with lived experience and who now runs an education charity about addiction, and they said there is no one on Gambling with Lives who has any lived experience, and it's important not to allow lived experience to take over. Lived experience belongs in the addiction recovery side. It does not belong on the Gambling Commission exclusively, because that implies that the job of the regulator is to regulate out harm from the market. That is not the job of the regulator. The job of the regulator is to serve consumers. And that, of course, does include addicts, but it also includes people who are able to gamble healthily.
It sounds to me like you are quite optimistic that we're going to be able to have £25 each way on the 2030 Grand National, but more from a case that it's a little bit like being a parent. You can see that this isn't going to work. You can see that logic doesn't stand up, but they're going to have to go through the process of figuring out themselves. We can't halt it. So they're going to have to go down the route of trying to get this into legislation before they realize it simply can't work. Do you think that's the most likely scenario ahead of us?
Well, the danger of that is that once legislation is in place or guidance is in place, it's more difficult to get it reversed. So the ratchet only generally moves in one direction. So if you look at sugar, for example, at first it was that we're going to put very sugary products on a higher shelf out of reach of children. And then it was that we are not going to allow sugary snacks by the checkout in case you somehow get tempted by a Kit Kat. And then it was that we are going to tax sugary drinks by, I think it's, if you go to McDonald's and you want a ordinary Coke instead of a Diet Coke, you have to pay an extra 14 pence. And now we're talking about banning energy drinks for children. So it goes in very, very small increments, almost so it's unnoticed by people, so it doesn't cause an outrage. But we will never go back to a place where we have Kit Kats by the checkout because policies don't get reversed, they only generally get worse. And so, what we have to hope is that the Labour government are in a position now where they want to be seen as moderate. They're trying to get rid of the kind of radical image of their past. And so the accusation that they typically have is that they are the big state party. Um, and so I think that they will be looking to kind of cleanse their image of that, and will adopt a more pragmatic approach to gambling and will say, look, we're not going to go kind of big state on this. We're a sensible, moderate, modern Labour Party, and we are going to listen to the educators in the room, and that's exactly how it should be. This is not an outrageous proposal. It's not controversial or niche to suggest that we should let the people that know about addiction recovery in the room when we're talking about addiction recovery.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree with you. And 12 years ago, 12 years ago, I remember at Stan James, long gone. On one particular day where I knew I had an edge, I deposited in the region of £25,000 when I earned £50,000 a year in my job at that time. So half my annual salary in a single day. Now, we're not going to go back to those days. We cannot go back to those days. But these days, we are in a position where I did deposit £50 the other day at a bookmaker, and I was asked for almost 10 years worth of profit loss statements from different bookmakers to justify my affordability. I'm not saying we need to go back to the Stan James days. Perhaps they were a little bit too cowboy Wild West, but we cannot stay where we are today, or because it's ruining and going to ruin the entire gambling industry. So hopefully we can find a place that was a sweet zone between 2012 and 2024. Listen, Abbie, Andrew, appreciate all of your time today. If anyone wants to find out more about the work of the Gamblers Consumer Forum, is there a website and Twitter handle that they can go and visit?
Yes, so we have a website which is www.gamblesconsumerforum.com. We have our Twitter handle which is GamblersC Forum, but if you search Gamblers Consumer Forum, then we'll come up. And anyone can send us an email at any time. We actually have a call for evidence that's open where we're asking people who have experienced friction with affordability checks to submit that evidence so we can pass it on to DCMS, because obviously there's been a commitment
I
made
have, so I'm going to do that today. I will.
Perfect, excellent. No, the more the merrier, because obviously the Stuart Andrew has rather foolishly, from his point of view, kind of nailed his flags to the mast to say that affordability checks will only be implementable if they are frictionless. Well, we already know that that's impossible. So we'll be kind of collating, or we've received so many responses, and we'll be sending that off to DCMS to say, really don't bother with your pilot because we have it all here.
Awesome. I'm going to go and have a look at that today. Appreciate it. Well, thank you very much for your time, Andrew and Abbie. And hopefully we chat soon as the next big event happens. And hopefully that's not waiting until Labour are in power in the next election, because these things tend to drag on, don't they? So, yeah, I appreciate both of your time.